97% of Egypt's fresh water comes from a single river, the Nile. In September 2025, a country 1,000 miles upstream finished building a wall of concrete across that river's largest tributary, big enough to hold 74 billion cubic meters of water behind it. Egypt's government called it illegal. Ethiopia called it the greatest engineering achievement in its history. Nobody agreed on anything except one fact. This is now the largest hydroelectric dam on the entire African continent, and the argument over it isn't over.
If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit subscribe now, because we're about to go inside the engineering that made this possible. What you're about to see next took years, billions of dollars, and engineering most people said couldn't be done.
The Blue Nile begins in the Ethiopian highlands and supplies roughly 85% of the water that eventually reaches Egypt, a country that receives almost no rainfall of its own and depends on the Nile for nearly all its fresh water. For over a century, Egypt operated under colonial-era treaties that gave it and Sudan the overwhelming majority of the Nile's flow, with Ethiopia the source of most of that water, receiving essentially nothing. In 2011, Ethiopia broke from that arrangement entirely, announcing construction of a dam on the Blue Nile, designed not just to generate electricity, but to permanently change who controls the river's flow. Egypt called it an existential threat. Ethiopia called it a sovereign right to develop its own resources. The dam would take 14 years, cost roughly $5 billion, funded almost entirely by Ethiopians themselves through bonds and public contributions rather than foreign loans, and become the single largest hydropower project on the African continent. Engineers selected a gorge roughly 30 kilometers from the Sudanese border, chosen specifically for its geology. A narrow canyon cut through solid bedrock, capable of anchoring one of the largest concrete structures ever built in Africa. Because the project sat at the center of a regional dispute that had simmered for a century, planning wasn't just technical. Every design decision, from reservoir size to filling speed, would eventually become a diplomatic flashpoint between three nations. Crews excavated deep into the bedrock of the gorge to create a foundation capable of resisting the immense lateral pressure of billions of tons of water pushing against it. The main structure would be built as a roller-compacted concrete gravity dam, a design that relies on sheer mass rather than height alone to hold back the reservoir, using dense layers of concrete compacted in place rather than poured as a single pour, allowing the structure to rise in massive continuous lifts. The completed main dam stands 170 meters tall and stretches 1,800 meters across the gorge at its crest. Built from 10.7 million cubic meters of roller-compacted concrete, enough material to bury a small city. A second structure, the Saddle Dam, extends the barrier another 5 kilometers along a lower ridgeline, curved like a crescent moon, and faced in concrete over compacted rockfill, sealing off every possible path for water to bypass the main structure. Behind both dams, engineers created a reservoir 172 kilometers long, submerging 1,875 square kilometers of the Blue Nile Valley and holding 74 billion cubic meters of water, roughly the annual flow of the entire river. Inside the dam's power stations sit 13 France's turbines, 2 rated at 375 megawatts and 11 at 400 megawatts, combining for a total installed capacity of 5,150 megawatts, enough to more than double Ethiopia's entire national electricity output and generate an average of nearly 1 gigawatt hours every year. Filling a reservoir this size couldn't happen all at once without threatening the water supply of 2 downstream nations. So Ethiopia staged it across 5 separate phases between 2020 and 2023, each one triggering fresh rounds of negotiation and in several cases threats from Cairo. On September 9, 2025, Ethiopia officially inaugurated the dam, running turbines that had already been generating power in phases since 2022, formally declaring the project finished after 14 years of construction. By December 2024, the reservoir had reached its maximum operating level of 640 meters, and the final concrete work on the dam itself was complete. Egypt did not send a delegation to the inauguration. Its foreign ministry called Ethiopia's construction of the dam without a binding water sharing agreement illegal, reviving language its officials have used for over a decade, language that has occasionally included direct references to military options if Ethiopia's actions were ever judged to threaten Egypt's water security. Sudan, caught geographically and politically between the 2 larger powers, has shifted its position multiple times depending on its own internal crises. More than a decade of negotiations, mediated at various points by the African Union, the United States, and international observers, have failed to produce a binding treaty on how much water Ethiopia must release downstream during future droughts, the single question that matters most to Egyptian farmers and Cairo's water planners. In January 2026, the United States offered to mediate again. Whether that succeeds may determine whether the Nile's next chapter is written through diplomacy or through the kind of conflict experts have warned about for over a decade. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is now finished, generating power and physically unchangeable. The argument over it is not. It stands as proof that a nation once defined by famine and foreign aid can build the largest hydroelectric project on its continent, almost entirely with its own money. It also stands as a reminder that solving an engineering problem doesn't automatically solve the political one sitting behind it. 97% of Egypt's water still depends on a decision now made 1,000 miles away by a government it does not control. If you want to see the next megaproject reshaping power, water, and politics on a continental scale, subscribe now, because these stories are only getting bigger.